Never is the cost of war so carefully counted as on the 11th day of the 11th month. In a moment, two people offer a view from the front lines and a soldier's perspective on the continuous cycle of war and violence, especially in the Middle East. James Loney talks about peace through nonviolence, through his work with Christian peacemaker teams, and recalls his 118-day captivity in Baghdad. And former Canadian Forces Captain Robert Samra reflects on the incident that saw him tried and acquitted on a charge of battlefield homicide. As we ask, why is peace such a hard sell? This is Context, the show that looks at life beyond the headlines.
Welcome to Context. I'm Lorna Dueck. Well, if Remembrance Day is when we reflect on the price paid for freedom and peace, how does a soldier reach the decision to sacrifice? And at what cost? It's impossible to pose those questions without thinking of those who go to the front lines. So today, two soldiers help us understand that. Corporal Tamar Freeman and former Army Captain David Mack, a Canadian who served in the famed British Black Watch Regiment. Welcome to Context. Thank you. Wonderful to have you both here for our Remembrance Day broadcast. And Tamar, let me start with you. How did you reach the decision that you wanted to serve as a corporal? You're a medic. You still serve at Borden, CFB Borden. You've been in very active duty. How did you reach the decision to serve?
My father had been in the Air Force before I was born, and I'd already seen pictures of him. He seemed to be having a lot of fun. It looked really interesting and sort of adventurous, and I first joined the reserves to try it out, really liked it, so then I decided to join the regular force and decided on medic because of sort of the biology and the anatomy, and just I found it to be a really interesting area, and it was sort of bigger than just being a civilian equivalent.
You're making a decision that you're going to take your safety and trade it in and give it to other people. You're going to enter into harm's way. How did you reach peace about that?
We do a lot of pre-deployment training. And in the pre-deployment training, I think it gives you the confidence in both yourself and the people you're working with that you can manage any situation. And part of you knows that it's an illusion, but you don't go into those situations thinking, I'm going to die, everyone around me is going to die, we're all going to get hurt. You can't do your job if you truly believe that. So I think for most people that I know, they don't believe that they believe you're going into harm's way, but that you're not going to be the one that's going to be injured or die, perhaps. I think it allows you to do your job that way.
David, you had a very different experience. You were a student. You had gone to one of Canada's fine Christian universities, went off to Oxford to take a master's degree in theology, and you start thinking about going to war. What is going on from that context?
Wow, there's a lot there. I think there's a lot of different questions that I had. I think it was back in 2001. It was the summer of 2001. I had made up my mind to give the reserves a try, like Corporal Tamar here. I wanted to do something that was more than just me. I wanted to give of myself. And I wanted to do an act of service, something beyond myself. And I wound up signing up very early on in the summer of 2001 to giving a reserve unit a go. Suddenly 9/11 happened, and the context fundamentally shifted and changed. This thing where I wanted to simply experience the military life, experience that notion of service, which is fundamental to the armed forces. This suddenly changed on me, and I found myself now looking forward to finishing my degree and going full-time Army.
Okay, Tamar, you had the unique challenge, maybe it's not a unique challenge, but there aren't very many women still represented in the military. What special challenges did that pose for you? Does that pose for you? You're still active duty.
I would say the first challenge was being a small woman.
Yeah, you are petite.
So the challenges certainly initially are having to manage the equipment, and if you want to be treated fairly and you want to be treated, I'm going to say the same, You have to carry the same equipment. You have to do the same things.
92 pounds of kit on
Absolutely.
your back. David, you had a unique challenge because you're a student studying the teachings of Jesus to love your enemy, to take on suffering rather than inflict suffering and pain. And you end up being dropped as a British captain. You're dropped right into the hottest zones, taking out to kill and to capture.
Yeah.
How did you reconcile that with this great background you're learning in theology and Christian love?
It's a great question. I think there's a few ideas that kind of gave me the ability to do this. First of all, I saw myself very much as a peacemaker. You know, there's evil out there. We can't deny it. Whether this is an evil form of somebody trying to kill a 14-year-old girl in Pakistan or the 20th century genocides that we witnessed, there is evil out there, and sometimes we have to use force. When I was at Sandhurst, that's the military academy where we trained to become officers. The first lesson that we had about leadership was the story of, and ethics, was the story of Christ washing the feet of his disciples.
You learned that in the military.
This is the first lesson we had. This is incredible, this notion of servant leadership. The motto that we had at Sandhurst was serve to lead. There was no doubt that our act was an act of service. There's also sacrifice too. I gave up my life for 6 years. I gave up everything. I gave up choice. I gave up freedom. I gave up my career.
But fundamentally, this is a violent engagement that you're going to have to engage. You were Iraq and Afghanistan. Violence, you came to understand there are times when a Christian of that kind of service level must also kill.
For every reason you've highlighted, a Christian is faced with the complexity of loving your enemy in face of war. This is what General MacArthur sort of points at and hints at in his speech at West Point. He talks about, above all else, above anybody else, it's the soldier alone who prays most for peace, for he must bear the deepest wounds and scars of war.
Okay. I have to ask you, Tamar, when you hear that kind of struggle and that kind of moral dilemmas that you all take to the field, why would you recommend someone get into this wonderful, or maybe not so wonderful, occupation of caring for other people's security?
If we are to look after each other, sort of in the broadest context, whether you're looking after those in your neighborhood or in your family, or the greater neighborhood, which is other countries, if you feel a sense of responsibility in that way, then it's a good choice to make, because the area you work in is not just local. It might be a disaster somewhere in your neighborhood or in your province or in this country, but it might also have you put into other theaters where you're still helping people that are in need, and just the sense of doing something bigger is huge. I'm not just saying that you feel important, it's just that you feel like you're doing something that really matters.
That's an interesting theme in both of your stories here. Thank you both very much in this Remembrance Day reflection on the role of serving in our military. Thank you. What's your reaction to this statement? The benefits of Canada's peacekeeping missions are worth the sacrifices. Do you agree or disagree? Join the conversation. Please send us your answers by phone, email, Facebook, or Twitter. We'd love to hear from some of our military families out there. Our studio audience is taking a live vote on that question, and I'll have those results in a moment. When we come back, 118 days in captivity. We'll talk to Christian peace activist James Loney about a book and an experience that would change his life forever.